This is Collective Sessions, a new stage for athletes not just to play but to own. From lived experience, we're building world-changing ventures and flipping the script around business, sport and impact. The future starts here. So hi Aled, and welcome to our first ever Collective Sessions. So I'd like to say that it's planned that it's a fully Welsh start to the series, but it hasn't been. But what a wonderful way to kickstart what we're standing for here at Squoggle. So if you'd like to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everybody. My name is Aled Jenkins. I am a 35-year-old male from South Wales, Swansea.
Hey.
I I am an ex-rugby player, now turned co-founder of a well-being and mindset app called Athleet. Not the most interesting bloke on the planet, but that pretty much sums it up. I may add that this is my first podcast, and it's a pleasure to be here with a fellow Welshie like yourself.
I was going to say, I find it very hard to believe, though, well, she's not that interesting. I mean,
Well, I
plenty of
probably am
stories
for some.
about it.
Probably more interesting looking than anything else. Um,
Funny looking.
it's funny looking, yeah. You said it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Amazing.
me in a nutshell. I also retrained in finance after I finished playing, but found that that wasn't for me, and kind of followed my nose into the business world, and that's where I am now.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
obviously people will know you as a former rugby player, you know, they will know that, and now a founder. But if you were to describe yourself in who you are right now, how would you describe yourself?
That's a tough question. I don't, in terms of my rugby career, I'm not sure if many people will know me. I had a pretty, rocky road, I should say. I was filled with injuries, um, and setbacks. I had some big injuries in my youth that stopped me quite a lot. But I got to a decent level, played at a fairly high standard, which has probably shaped me today. Fairly resilient fella who's gone through the ups and downs of a sporting career and spat out the other end. Um, Now turning all my learnings into business, and trying to create something to give back to the generation behind me, I guess. All the learnings that I took from that career to now help the people behind me who are probably going through the similar things.
Yeah. So let's go back to that kind of beginning of your journey with and your relationship with rugby. What was the thing that first drew you to rugby? Obviously, being from Wales, it's a castle
Yeah, yeah,
baby.
it's in our blood,
Well,
I think.
it's absolutely in our blood. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my earliest memory is probably going to watch rugby. Rugby's in the family. My dad was a professional rugby player. Well, wasn't professional back then, but was a rugby player. Played for Swansea Whites, the local team down here. And the early memories are going to watch him, running around in the field on the back of the pitch while the game's going on, and probably subconsciously, taking it all in and slowly starting to understand what rugby was all about. But I think it's in the blood. Um, Watching my dad turn into a coach, with amateur teams, and it just being in the household. They say if you hang around the barbers enough, you're bound to get a haircut, and I think that's what happened to me with rugby. I think I was around it enough to for it to subconsciously kind of become a part of my life as well. So that's probably the earliest memory I've got. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Love that. And then looking back kind of at your career, obviously, you know, what is the highest point in your memory, the bit that you kind of really look back at with pride?
Um, Traveling the world on the World Seven circuit was definitely a highlight. I've loved traveling for however long I can remember, but being able to marry that up with the sport that I loved at the time as well was very special. We were traveling to all different corners of the world. So that was super special. And I think as well, it was pulling on the jersey for my home region, the Ospreys. I think I set that as a goal for myself as a young lad.
Nice.
Uh, and reaching that goal was pretty special. Although, I didn't have the longest run with the region. Just having that debut was very special for me. Running out to a home crowd in Swansea. So yeah, that was probably one of the two of the main highlights of my career, I'd say.
Yeah, incredible. And yeah, I love the idea that kind of like it gave you the freedom to travel. It's
Yeah, it was
and
super special.
what really
Like
matters, yeah.
we used to go to remarkable places. You'd fly to Wellington uh, one week, and then the following week you'd be in Vegas playing, and then Dubai and Port Elizabeth. It was surreal, and I was kind of looking around thinking, what is this my job? Like sent
Yeah.
around the world playing rugby. It was quite poor rugby, to be honest. We were, you know, we weren't much use as a nation at that time. The results speak for themselves, but the traveling was great.
It's quite quite a transition from Wales, isn't it? And I know I've experienced that myself and like being able to kind of, look at the world outside of Wales. I love
Yeah,
Wales, don't get me wrong,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
the ability the sport's got to take you out of it is just remarkable.
There's a big bad world out there.
There is a big bad world out there, not safe.
Uh, no, it was super special though. Yeah, really fond memories of the travel, and there was a few injuries that kind of led into other parts of my career, but in the whole, it was a very special time. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings us on, I guess, then to what would you say your lowest point was?
definitely injuries. I think I had some fairly substantial injuries in probably very pivotal times in my career. I had a double ACL injury at the age of 18, um, which stopped me playing for around 2 years. So the ages of probably 19, 20, and I think I came back at the age of 21. I didn't play. I was, stuck on crutches and rehab and all that. So that was probably one of the lowest. Um, that wasn't the last injuries. I've had a long list of injuries, so they didn't stop there. But that's probably the main one that stands out to me.
Yeah.
Uh, I came out of university. I was playing in Cardiff Met in the Bucks League at the time. So, you're playing a good standard, you're sharpening your tools to your trade, and then to have to sit out of the game for 2 years then with a knee injury, not a part of a squad because you kind of left uni at that point, and um, yeah, just losing a lot of what felt like a lot of momentum in my career was kind of tough mentally, tough physically, um, and probably for sure one of the hardest, points of my career.
That's so young to go through that as well, right? In terms of being able
Yeah,
to having to pause in life with all that
yeah,
energy that you've got and all that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
success and inspiration that you've got to kind of move forwards. So how did you deal
Yeah.
with that?
Um, I knew I was always going to play rugby, so I knew that I was always going to go back to it.
Yeah,
And it's one of those things that you grit your teeth and you go, right, I got to get on with this to make the best out of a terrible situation. And um, I think having that mindset um, really helps you in sport and outside of sport to go through adversity and go, you know what, I'm out the other end now. I'll learn what I have from the bad situation, and I'll go forward with a different mindset and a different perspective. So I try to take the good things out of it. Um, you know, I'm saying this in hindsight now. Probably at the time, I was probably very, a very angry person at the world, saying, why me? Um, but yeah, I think I used it. I hope I used it as fuel to push me forward and to give me another element to my game, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, there's that famous saying is that you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only do it looking backwards, right? And I think
Definitely.
helps you kind of make sense of things when you can reflect on things and recalibrate into that space. So I suppose then the next question kind of would be, at what point did you realize that actually you couldn't move forwards and that rugby might not be the pathway that was going to take you through to the age that you thought it would?
Yeah. Well, I probably had a fairly unconventional ending to my career. Um, my contract got terminated due to the fact that I couldn't get back to playing standard.
Right.
Um, there's a clause in most contracts that say, if you can't get back to playing within or training within 6 months, you we have the right to terminate your contract. And
Savage.
yeah, really savage. And I've had a few contracts where, especially when injuries do, spill over that 6 month mark where no one really kind of, you know, holds you up on it and says, right, you're 6 months and one day now, so sling your hook, you're off. But
Mm.
my last club did. They were fairly savage with it. So, on the Friday I was employed, had the job of my dreams, and by the Monday I was unemployed, uh, looking for a new job, looking for a new career, because the surgeon had said, look, you're probably not going to get back to playing standard with the damage that's to your body. So it came thick and fast. It was a strange time for me because, again, I was probably very angry with how everything had unfolded. I felt hard done by. Again, lost a lot of momentum because I was only 28, 27 at the time. So you're at a
Nothing.
pretty, prime stage of your career. Um, to then go through an injury at the start where the surgeon says, look, you're going to make a full recovery. It's, small, it needs good management, good physio, good medical treatment, whatever. The 6 months later, having another surgery and them saying you're never going to play again. So that was super tough. Again, I probably I don't know if I've fully, dissected it and fully taken it in even till now, but I think I've taken a lot of that strength, or don't know what the word is there, but taken that into the next stage of my life, which is business. And um, hopefully that has given me the strength and the robustness to take the smacks in the business world now. And not to get too caught up with it all, and to keep moving forward. So
I suppose it's giving that sense of purpose, isn't it? And like often when we talk to athletes, we talk about transition, and actually transition doesn't happen once. And there's
yeah,
that famous kind of famous psychological report around athletes dying twice because it's actually a
yeah,
complete loss of identity, and it's like having to think about what that next phase looks like, not just from a skill set standpoint, but like what are you and how are you showing up to the world kind of
yeah,
moment. Just briefly touched on it right at the beginning that you made that transition into business before you became a founder. So let's talk about what that transition felt like and how, when you went through that transition through after the silence of the end of the career, how
yeah.
did you navigate that piece?
Uh, I was lucky that I came out of rugby, and I had great support around me in terms of my family. They kind of pushed me into retraining, although I wasn't entirely sure what my next purpose was as such. And I think as transition athletes, I think it's really hard to immediately think you're going to find that purpose.
Of course.
You play a sport throughout your life, you dedicate everything to your trade. It's something that you love to do, and then if you're lucky enough to get paid for it and to call it your career, then it's the ultimate win. So to come out of that and then think that you're going to find that something like that straight off the bat is um, not realistic. So I went in straight into training into finance. I was lucky that my father is also in finance, so he kind of pushed me down that road and said, "Look, retrain, see if you enjoy it. If you don't, you've still got another string to your bow with finance as something to fall back on." But I always had this like burning desire to take what I learned from my career and push it into something to help the next generation. And the day well, not the day, but the year that I left sport, I knew that I was gonna come back to it, and um, make it a bit of a personal mission to go back and be like, right, what I've learned, especially around injury, is that a lot of people are going to go through it, whether they like it or not. And if maybe we can take a bit of the struggle away from managing, you know, certain situations in those environments, then, that'd be great. So I always knew that I was going to go back into to business because it's what I wanted to do. And then when you align with that with passion, then you're like, right, it's a no-brainer then, you know. So then I took steps towards building Athleet, and over the years we've started conversations, networking, building an MVP. Now we're at a stage where we've got a fully fledged product out there, that I'm super proud of and super passionate about. So, it's a full circle moment, and um, you know,
Definitely. And you often find the best ideas come out of lived experience, don't you? And in terms of how
100%.
you turn that lived experience, whether it's a negative or a positive one, into purpose and into something that can mobilize you to move forwards and create impact. So just give us a bit of an overview of what Athleet is.
Athleet is a athlete management system. It's a coaching tool that allows coaches to gain insights on their players, on their squads. Um, we harness player-led data around features like journaling, matchday journaling, training reports, and well-being updates to give coaches a holistic view of their players. Um, as you mentioned, it's lived experience at some points in training or games or things like that. You've got players who aren't feeling 100%, for whatever reason, whether it's around injury, whether it's around, life outside of sport. And I think it's definitely a strength and a power to know that from a coach's perspective, to know that, your players aren't feeling 100%. And it gives you that data then to act upon and to manage in a more efficient way. Um, for the players, that's more of a coach perspective. From players' perspective, it's more of an accountability tool. It's self-reflection. It allows players to put things down to really understand and dissect their performances, and whether it's training or um, or games, and also a tool to express yourself if you're having problems outside of sport.
Love that. So in terms of that journaling elements, in terms of self-reflection, when did that journaling kind of practice come into your life to help inform,
Uh,
Athleet?
I think it was indirectly. I think it was when I got to a certain standard of rugby. We used to have team meetings on a Monday morning. At the start of the year, they'd give you a notepad and pen and say, right, that's your notepad for the year. This is where you put all the tactics. This is where you put all the team sessions. Like, you dissect the team that you're playing on the weekend. What are their traits? What are their strengths, weaknesses? You also analyze the players that you're playing against or potentially might be playing against, and you find their strengths and weaknesses. And at the end of the year, you'd have this book full of, notes on people that you're playing on the weekend and stuff. And I think going when I got injured, one of the injuries I had, and turning up to meetings as an injured player with a notepad and pen, you're thinking, well, this doesn't really relate to me, so I'm not going to be playing on the weekend. And I think it was that point then I started writing things down about my day and how I was going to structure the day as an injured player. And
Nice.
I started writing things down about, what I wanted to get out of the day, to hold myself accountable. And I think it started then. And I can't remember the exact moment, but I started journaling the whole injury process, just for my own benefit, going home at night and writing down the day, just to be like, for me, it's writing stuff down that makes it real. So going back and writing stuff down where I was like, well, you're not telling the truth there because you didn't do that. So hold yourself accountable, because and that's how it started, and then it kind of grew from there, and then I was just journaling daily about everything. And I think that's why Athlete is what it is today. Because I found the power of what journaling gave me.
So when in that journaling process, that's interesting, isn't it? That actually, unlike me, who might maybe make myself a list of things that I need to do and highlight things off that I've already done to kind of cheat the process a little
Yeah,
bit, rather than
yeah,
kind of like making myself completely accountable. The fact that
yeah,
you kind of were really using that as an accountability tool. So
yeah.
what would you say one of the hardest questions when you've kind of gone into that self-reflection mode that you've had to ask of yourself when you've been writing
I
things
think
down?
accountability. It's about being true to yourself, because no one else is looking at this piece of paper, right? It's just
No.
you writing stuff down about yourself. Um, so it's definitely the accountability, and there is self-reflection in there around, the week that you've just done. Are you happy with it? What would you change for the following week or the upcoming week? Um, and there's a really good quote from Simone Manuel, who's an Olympic swimmer, and she said that writing things down helps me clear my head. When I'm honest with the page, I become more honest with myself, and that
Nice.
helps me grow not just as an athlete but as a person.
Love that.
And I remember reading that and being like, wow, like that's so true. Um, and definitely resonated with me. And I was like, that's pretty powerful stuff. So
Really powerful.
yeah, it was definitely the accountability that I was doing it for. I think is to keep myself on track. Because I'd had so many injuries, I'd probably had injury fatigue where I was like, no, not another one, or it's the same journey again, or what have you. So it gave me a different kind of aspect, different element to keep pushing myself forward and keep myself motivated, I think.
Love that. And with the athletes that kind of started using your products, what kind of anecdotes are you kind of getting back in that process?
Um, from people using the app,
Yeah.
um, we've had some great testimonials around, what coaches are seeing through the app. We had one from a big club up in Scotland saying, things like we we wouldn't have access to this data even if we sat our players down for a quarter of an hour each before training. We just wouldn't get it. And I think it's a generational thing. I think they find comfort in, typing things into a screen rather than knocking the coach's door and saying, you know, I need help, or I feel this way, or I don't think I played very well on the weekend, or whatever is on their mind. So to get testimonials back like that was, super powerful for us. They came at the right time in terms of, you put a product out to the world, and sometimes it's definitely not the finished product, and it needs a bit of work. But we got these testimonials back, and we were like, right, we're onto something here. The value is evident, and if we can help players be more open and honest, and as a byproduct, coaches get a better understanding of their player, then that's only a good thing for, performance on the field and off the field. So, yeah, it's been great.
And I love the fact that you're so rooted in purpose and like that impact. Obviously, it's all very close to your heart that, even
Yeah,
when you're scaling or building a product, that stays a priority in terms
yeah,
of,
definitely.
allowing those boundaries to be broken down for transparency and for mental health. So would you say the athlete is a well-being tool, a performance tool, something deeper, or kind of a mixture of all?
Um, I'd say it's a mixture of all. I think what we're seeing at the moment is probably more of a performance tool. Um, I think coaches are adopting it more for, while we're a B2B type business, we're offering coaches a kind of tool to help them understand their players to ultimately push performance. Um, we're by no means a clinical tool in terms of mental health, um, or anything like that. But there are elements of it, I think, where players are feeling comfortable in the environment that they're in, that they're willing to share certain things with their coaches, which is great also. So I'd probably say we're more of a performance tool. We've got features around, other features that probably lean away slightly from well-being, and more, we've got training features that are attendance or reports that allow players to log, stress, not stress, but more intensity and things like that. So that's more of a physical kind of gauge. So yeah, I'd probably say performance just pips it.
Nice. And I think, obviously people tend to well, lots of people tend to get a bit fearful of data, don't they, in terms of how data's being used, the anonymous nature of some data, which especially with athletes giving data to the business side of sport. So
Definitely.
how would you talk about, because if I'm an athlete using the product and I fear that might be weaponized, my data might be weaponized
Yeah.
against me, what would you say about how you're creating to ensure that that isn't the case?
Well, yeah, we tell coaches that we are a tool for you to harness and to use in an environment that you create. And if your players don't feel safe that they can be open enough, then
Yeah,
that's not an athlete problem. That's a kind of your
cultural.
team dynamic problem or a cultural problem.
Yeah,
Um, So it all comes down to, the environment that they're in. The Apple never force things out of them. We prompt certain questions, and we give them the questions to try and be honest and open. But at the end of the day, we don't force anything out of anyone. And um, it's funny because we speak to some coaches. We get a full spectrum of coaches, as you can imagine. We get some coaches that say, well, why would I want to know what my players are feeling? To the other side of the spectrum, where people are like, yes, this is a no-brainer, of course. So it's really funny, that why we get some quotes like, why would I want 45 coaches in my team? Which is, not what the app is designed to do, and it doesn't do. But trying to explain this to some, dinosaur coaches is another thing. So yeah.
I guess that becomes your selection process of who you want to work with and who you don't in the first place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. You can't see it until you've asked the question and they've
No,
given you
exactly.
the answer.
Yeah,
So
but hopefully some of those questions help the organisations reflect on what their cultural standards are in the first place, right? And that's an
definitely.
opportunity to take them on a journey of acknowledgement. Because I think sometimes
Yeah.
we're so focused on pushing on performance wise that sometimes we don't reflect on ourselves. And it's easy to
Yeah.
do that, especially in sport, because sport becomes quite bubbled sometimes, doesn't it?
Definitely.
In terms of the achievements that need to happen on the pitch. Um,
Definitely.
so it's good to question some of those standards and values, I guess.
So, yeah, definitely.
So when we come to, so I'm a big believer in talking about ownership rather than being an entrepreneur, because I believe ownership is the rite of passage to freedom and, to create impact. And, I'm a big believer that not everybody is an entrepreneur, and
Yeah.
actually that creation can lead to more ownership than that. So if I would say to you what ownership meant to you, what does ownership mean when you're going through this process of creation?
Yeah. It's a tough one. I think there's a fine line between entrepreneurship and ownership. I think, for me, um, entrepreneurship is probably someone who could capitalize in any market and create something to um, take advantage of that certain market. I think ownership is more um, based on like real life experience.
Yeah,
Um, from where I came from, and um, the background that I've got was probably where the idea was born. I never thought at that point that I'd be building a business off the back of it. I probably felt hard done by, and was probably in a negative space. But like you said, joining the dots, having those experiences given me a perspective to be able to create something that at the moment, and touch wood, that people are enjoying to use, that they haven't had before, that is really making an impact. So, I think that understanding of the problem and um, creating something that that you would have benefited massively from when you were going through those stages in your career really gives you that kind of understanding and ownership of the business that you're going into. So I think that's that kind of
yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And yeah, in terms of then kind of obviously taking the idea of athletes and obviously your lived experience, what was the kind of like popping point where you brought in support, I suppose, to help you realize the vision?
yeah, well, I came straight off a rugby field. I had no experience in business. Probably people would say I didn't have that much life experience either. So,
These
you know,
fails traveling.
yeah, it was a learning curve for sure. But I've always been that person that'll ask for help if I don't know what the hell's going on, and that's probably more often than not, to be honest. Uh, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to take this, any further than where I was at this point. So I knew I had to, reach out to people who understand business, who have experienced business. Um, and yeah, it all started with networking. The sports community and the rugby community is such a great, networking space. Most people are so willing to help, even if it's just opening the doors to their contacts or giving you, referrals or whatever. So I reached out to a few people, we got chatting, and I kind of told them my idea, although it's not what it is today, Athlete. It was a version of, and we've iterated and pivoted slightly. Um, I finally met up with Damien, who's the CEO of Athleet, and Sam, who's our CTO, uh, and they were on board with the vision, and we're keen to get involved. And yeah, there's three of us in the business now. We are looking to expand. So yeah, and I still question myself. I'm like, I still don't know what's going on around here from a business perspective. But from a
I
product perspective, I can give my experiences, my vision, and my understanding for whatever value that is.
Exactly. Well, nobody can take away that lived experience, can they? And I think,
No,
I'm always a big fan of being the stupidest person in the room. I think if then you're not surrounding yourself by people that are going to challenge you and test you and help
definitely.
you grow. So,
Yeah,
it's a humbling moment, but it's a good one,
definitely
right?
that case, yeah.
So, in terms of that kind of pathway to ownership, what do you think maybe stopping other athletes going on that pathway of ownership? And, even if, sometimes they've got an idea that they think might be something that could be something, but then maybe shy away from seeing it through. What do you think the barriers to entry would be?
It's definitely a daunting landscape. I think you can't be naive going into business and think, oh, I've got an idea, I'm going to make it, the best thing ever. And I probably did at some point.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah, a lot of us.
Lot included. Yeah.
Um, but I think for where I was, and meeting Damien and Sam was great for me because they understood that it's not all sh the sunshine and rainbows. It's all you've got to understand business. You've got to hit certain KPIs. You've got to make sure that you've got product market fit and all this all these things that just I didn't know about. And I was lucky to align with these two and be able to push forward with them. So for me, uh, from my experience, and if I had to say to someone who's, at an earlier stage of business than I am, I'd say, speak to people, network with people. Um, you know, uh, there's more information to be had out there. Make sure that you're making, the right calls. And when it's right, it's right. Go for it. That's what we did. And we're still alive. We're still
Well, just
going
get
strong.
started, actually, Aled. Yeah, it's a long way to go, and you're on it.
Yeah, we're growing, week on week, and it's really exciting time at the minute. And um, yeah. So for anyone who's in the landscape looking to, you know, jump in, make sure all your ducks are in a row and jump, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. So,
Yeah.
in your mind, what does success for Athleet actually look like in terms of your kind of your personal success?
Uh,
Away from money and all that.
as you're going to say, sell to Amazon for 1 billion bucks.
Yes, $1 billion sale. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I guess the vision is uh, to give back and add value to young athletes, to coaches, for everything out there that makes it hard to, for clubs that have, um, for coaches that don't have much time or points of contact with players, we want to make their lives easier. We want to make the conversation between player and coach a lot more open. I
Yeah,
don't think we're open enough, especially as rugby players. We're designed to stay quiet and hide weakness. And I don't think that is the right thing to do. So hopefully we can, help teams be more transparent, open and honest to better themselves on and off the field, I guess.
love that. So, if you were to kind of look at young Aled coming into rugby for the first time, and Athleet existed, what would be the one prompt you would give your younger self?
But I'd probably tell myself to start football or get into golf. That would be my first prompt. It'd be, yeah, the prompt would be, how can you change rugby?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Question.
What transferable skills will a rugby player fit into what position on a football field? So I'd probably tell myself to be a goalkeeper or something and just try and save. But for me, it's probably being, the I probably was one of those people who would hide weakness. I'd probably suffer in silence, whether it was around injury or, not being where I wanted to be in a certain point in my career, not going through age grade, getting selected for your country under 18s, or, all these kind of checkpoints that people hit and think, oh, I'm on track here, because the journeys for everyone are different, and understanding that from an early age probably would have helped me a lot. But from a journaling aspect, I think, being open and honest and saying how you feel is definitely a strength, not a weakness, whether it's around injury or performance or whatever you've got going on in your life. And I said this to you the other day, and I can't show what way around it is the problem shared is a problem halved. Owen's right, isn't it? So I get that. Yeah, and I definitely believe in that. I think it's important to be open and honest. So I definitely tell my younger self to open the doors a lot earlier.
Yeah, and to not hold back, I guess.
Definitely.
So if you were to leave athletes that are listening to this now with one kind of final thought about ownership and about your journey, what would you say?
It's probably to do with the journey, like I had a very unconventional journey in sport. I didn't get to pro level until I was 20 odd. So very late, you walk into the change room and like, where have you been for the last 5 years? So, I think ownership of your journey, whatever journey that is, whether you've got injuries, whether you've got, different things happening in your life, I think owning the journey, knowing that, you can still take a lot of good out of whatever path is ahead of you. Because for me, I was that person that, would be angry at certain checkpoints in my career, being, I'm not doing this, like, I may as well give up, and having those thoughts and being like, but I was lucky enough to have the support system around me to be like, no, keep going, it'll work, and luckily it did. So yeah, I definitely say take ownership of the journey, whatever journey that is, and enjoy the ride, I guess.
Yeah, I think we could all do with a bit of that, to be fair. I think
I could.
yeah, definitely. You've got to enjoy it, don't you? And I think
Definitely.
well, thank you so much, Aled. And do you know what? My mum's going to be absolutely chuffed, because when I first started working at Manchester United in football, she told me the ball was the wrong shape. So at least I finally be able to kickstart the squad competition talking about the actual sport that my family care about. So you've done me a favour there. You've redeemed me a bit.
She's a wise woman.
She is a wise woman. She is a wise woman, actually. Yeah. Don't ever tell her that, though. Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, time.
Thanks for listening or watching today. Now give us a follow or subscribe to join us on our journey.